You think you know someone, until the truth comes crashing down. My name is Olivia, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have sworn I was living the dream. Perfect house, perfect husband, perfect life. The kind of life you only see in movies. Sprawling home in Connecticut, 2 golden retrievers chasing each other in the backyard, and a family portrait hanging above the fireplace that whispered success and happiness. It was the American dream, or so I thought. But dreams, as I soon found out, aren't always what they seem. There was a secret hiding in the corners of our picture-perfect life. A secret so tangled in lies I never saw it coming. It wasn't mine at first. No, it belonged to my husband Daniel and his father Robert. The men I loved and trusted, both had a dark truth they were keeping from me. And I was the last to know. One quiet night everything changed. The laughter stopped. The smiles faded. And I was left to piece together a truth that shattered everything I thought I knew about family, trust, and love. I met Daniel at Yale. He was everything I wasn't: confident, outgoing, from a family with old money and even older traditions. I was a scholarship student, raised by a single mother in a small apartment in Queens. He was drawn to my groundedness. He said, my realness. I was drawn to his charm, his intelligence, and the undeniable allure of a world so different from my own. Our wedding was a lavish affair at the family estate, a sprawling colonial mansion overlooking the Long Island Sound. Robert, Daniel's father, gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes. He spoke of welcoming me into the family, of how lucky Daniel was to have found me. He looked at me then, a long lingering look that made me feel uncomfortable. I dismissed it at the time, chalking it up to wedding day jitters and too much champagne. After the wedding, Daniel and I moved into the guest house on the estate. It was meant to be temporary, until we found a place of our own. But Daniel seemed reluctant to leave. He loved being close to his family, especially his father. Robert was a powerful figure. A retired CEO with a commanding presence and a booming laugh. He was the patriarch, the center of the family's universe. The main house was always bustling with activity: family dinners, holiday gatherings, cocktail parties for Robert's business associates. I tried to fit in, to play the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law, but I always felt like an outsider looking in. I was the quiet observer, watching the intricate dance of family dynamics, the unspoken rules, the subtle power plays. Robert was always attentive. He'd compliment my cooking, ask about my day, offer to help with anything I needed. First, I appreciated his kindness. It felt good to be accepted, to be included. But then the attention started to feel different. Started with small things. A lingering touch when he handed me a glass of wine. A compliment on my dress that felt a little too intimate. A look in his eyes that made my skin crawl. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was imagining things. He was just being friendly, a father figure. But the feeling of unease persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, we were all gathered in the living room after dinner. Daniel was engrossed in a conversation with his mother, and Robert and I were left alone by the fireplace. He was showing me old family photos, his hand resting on the back of the sofa, just inches from my shoulder. "You remind me of my wife when she was your age," he said, his voice low and husky. I shifted uncomfortably. "Oh." He smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Yes." She had that same fire in her eyes. His gaze lingered on me, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. It wasn't a fatherly look. It was something else entirely. I excused myself, saying I had a headache. I went to our guest house, locked the door, and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I felt violated and confused. Was I misinterpreting his behavior? Was I being paranoid? I confided in my best friend Sarah over the phone. "I don't know, Olivia," she said hesitantly. "Maybe you're just reading too much into it. He's probably just trying to be nice." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started to avoid Robert, making excuses to stay in the guest house, skipping family dinners whenever I could. Daniel noticed, of course. "What's going on, Olivia?" he asked one night, his brow furrowed with concern. "You've been distant lately, and you seem to be avoiding my father." I hesitated, unsure of what to say. How could I tell him that I was uncomfortable around his father? How could I explain a feeling, a gut instinct, that I couldn't even articulate myself? "I'm just tired," I lied. "Work has been stressful." He seemed to accept that, but I knew I couldn't keep avoiding the issue forever. The tension continued to build, a silent undercurrent running beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect family life. I started to notice other things. Robert's frequent trips to the guest house, ostensibly to check on us, but always when Daniel was away. The way he'd find excuses to be alone with me, even for just a few minutes. The way his eyes would follow me around the room. One afternoon I was working in the garden, tending to the roses that Daniel's mother loved so much. Robert came out ostensibly to help, but he spent more time watching me than he did working. "You have a natural grace, Olivia," he said, his voice low and close to my ear. "A quiet strength." I stiffened, pulling away slightly. "Thank you, Robert." He reached out and touched a strand of my hair, tucking it behind my ear. His fingers lingered on my skin, sending a jolt of electricity through me. It wasn't a pleasant sensation. It was unsettling. "You shouldn't hide your beauty," he said, his eyes locking with mine. I felt a wave of panic rising within me. This was not okay. This was wrong. I stood up abruptly, dropping my gardening tools. I need to go inside," I stammered. "I have a phone call to make." I fled to the guest house, my heart racing. I locked the door behind me, feeling like a prisoner in my own home. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep living like this, consumed by fear and suspicion. But what could I do? Who would believe me? Daniel adored his father. The family revered him. I was the outsider, the newcomer. I started to document everything. I kept a journal, writing down every uncomfortable interaction, every lingering touch, every suggestive comment. I knew it sounded crazy, paranoid, but I needed to have some kind of record, some kind of proof. One evening, Daniel was working late, and Robert invited me to have dinner with him and his wife in the main house. I couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. Dinner was a tense affair. Robert sat at the head of the table, his wife, Eleanor, at the other end. I sat between them, feeling like a pawn in a game I didn't understand. Robert dominated the conversation, regaling us with stories of his business successes. He kept refilling my wine glass, his hand brushing against mine each time. I felt his eyes on me constantly, even when he was talking to Eleanor. After dinner, Eleanor excused herself, saying she had a headache. Robert and I were left alone in the dining room. "Let me help you clear the table," I said, eager to escape his presence. "Nonsense," he said, standing up and walking towards me. "I'll take care of it." He stood behind me, his body close to mine. I could feel his breath on my neck. "You know, Olivia," he said softly, "I've been thinking about you a lot lately." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading. "Robert, please," I said, my voice trembling. "Don't." He placed his hands on my shoulders, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't what, Olivia? Don't tell you how I feel? Don't tell you how beautiful you are? How much I desire you?" His words were like a slap in the face. I felt a surge of anger, of revulsion. I turned around, pushing him away. "Stop it," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "This is wrong. You're my father-in-law." He laughed, a low, chilling laugh. "And you're my son's wife. That's what makes it so exciting." I stared at him, horrified. This was not the charming, sophisticated man I thought I knew. This was a predator. "I'm going to tell Daniel," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He smiled, a cruel, knowing smile. "Go ahead. Who do you think he'll believe? Me, his father, the man who's given him everything? Or you, the outsider, the girl from Queens?" His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. Daniel would never believe me. I was trapped. I ran out of the dining room, out of the house, into the cold night air. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. Until I collapsed on the grass, sobbing uncontrollably. I was alone, utterly and completely alone, with a secret that threatened to destroy everything. My perfect American dream had become a living nightmare. And how long must I remain silent? The question echoed in my mind. The cold Connecticut air bit at my skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill that had settled deep within my bones. Robert's words echoed in my mind, a cruel and calculated assessment of my powerlessness. Who would Daniel believe? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I don't know how long I lay there on the damp grass, weeping. Eventually, The sheer exhaustion of the emotional turmoil forced me into a fitful sleep. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the lawn. I felt numb, hollowed out. The world seemed surreal, as if I were watching a movie of my own life. A movie I desperately wanted to rewrite. I couldn't go back to the guest house, not yet. The thought of facing Daniel, of pretending that everything was normal, was unbearable. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out what to do. I walked for hours, aimlessly wandering through the manicured streets of the neighborhood. The perfect houses, the perfect families, the perfect lives, it all seemed like a mockery. How many secrets were hidden behind those closed doors? How many lies were whispered in the shadows? Eventually, I found myself at a small local coffee shop. I ordered a black coffee, needing the caffeine to jolt me back to reality. As I sat there sipping the bitter liquid, I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, searching for anyone I could confide in. Sarah, my best friend, was the obvious choice. But I hesitated. I hadn't told her the full extent of my suspicions, only hinting at my discomfort with Robert. Would she believe me? Would she think I was crazy? Then I saw another name, Michael. Daniel's older brother. Michael had always been the black sheep of the family, the rebel who had rejected the family business and moved to California to pursue a career in art. He was the only one in the family who seemed to see through the facade, the only one who might understand. I took a deep breath and pressed the call button. Olivia. Michael's voice was surprised, a little wary. We hadn't spoken in months. Michael, I need your help, I said, my voice trembling. I told him everything. The lingering touches, the suggestive comments, the dinner, Robert's confession, my fear of telling Daniel. I poured out my heart, my words tumbling over each other in a rush of desperation. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I held my breath, fearing his judgment, his disbelief. I believe you, he finally said, his voice low and serious. I always knew there was something off about him. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost brought me to my knees. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. Michael listened patiently as I recounted the events of the past few months. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes, just listened. When I was finished, he said, I'm coming back. I'll be there tomorrow. Knowing that Michael was on his way gave me a sliver of hope, a flicker of strength in the darkness. I spent the rest of the day at the coffee shop, nursing my coffee and trying to formulate a plan. I knew I couldn't stay at the estate any longer. I needed to get away, to create some distance between myself and Robert. I decided to book a room at a nearby hotel, using a credit card that Daniel didn't have access to. As evening approached, I forced myself to return to the guest house. I needed to pack a bag, to gather my essential belongings. I dreaded seeing Daniel, but I knew I had to be careful, to avoid arousing his suspicion. When I arrived, the house was dark and quiet. Daniel's car wasn't in the driveway. A note on the kitchen counter read, "Working late. Don't wait up. Love you." Relief flooded me. I had a few precious hours to myself. I quickly packed a suitcase, grabbing clothes, toiletries, and my laptop. I also took my journal, the one I had been using to document Robert's behavior. It was my only evidence, my only weapon. As I was zipping up my suitcase, I heard a noise. I froze, my heart pounding. Footsteps. Coming closer. The door to the guest house opened, and Robert stood there, silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. "Olivia," he said, his voice smooth and menacing. "Where do you think you're going?" I backed away, clutching my suitcase. I'm going to stay with a friend for a few days," I stammered. "I need some space." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He was blocking my escape. "Space," he repeated, his eyes glinting in the darkness. "From me." "From everything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "From this situation." He took another step closer, his presence filling the small room. I could smell his cologne, the same cologne he always wore. The scent that had once seemed sophisticated but now made me want to gag. "You're not going to tell Daniel, are you?" he asked, his voice a low whisper. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Because if you do," he said, his voice hardening, "you'll regret it. You'll lose everything. Your husband, your family, your life." I looked into his eyes and I saw a coldness, a ruthlessness, that I had never seen before. I knew he was capable of anything. "Let go of me," I said, my voice shaking but firm. He tightened his grip. "You belong to me, Olivia. You always have." His words, his touch, sent a wave of disgust through me. I wrenched my arm free, shoving him away with all my strength. He stumbled backward, surprised by my resistance. I grabbed my suitcase and ran out of the guest house, out of the estate, into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I drove to the hotel, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I checked in, locked the door to my room, and collapsed on the bed, sobbing. I was safe for now. But I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning Michael arrived. Seeing his familiar face, hearing his calm, reassuring voice was like a lifeline. I told him everything that had happened the night before, the confrontation with Robert, the escape. "He's dangerous, Olivia," Michael said, his face grim. "He's always been manipulative, controlling. He gets what he wants, no matter the cost." "What do I do?" I asked, my voice desperate. "Daniel will never believe me." Michael took a deep breath. "We need a plan," he said. "We need proof. And we need to protect you." We spent the next few days strategizing. Michael contacted a lawyer, a friend of his who specialized in family law and cases of abuse. The lawyer advised us to gather as much evidence as possible: my journal, any emails or text messages, and if possible, a recording of Robert's behavior. The lawyer also advised me to file a restraining order against Robert. It wouldn't guarantee my safety, but it would be a legal record of his harassment and a deterrent against further contact. The lawyer explained that the restraining order would prevent the other party from having contact, direct or indirect, and that the judge could order the other party to move out of a shared residence. The thought of confronting Robert again, of facing him in court, terrified me. But I knew I had to do it. I couldn't let him get away with this. I couldn't let him destroy my life. Michael helped me find a new apartment, a small, secure place in a different town. He helped me move my belongings. He stayed with me while I filed the restraining order. He accompanied me to court. The hearing was brutal. Robert, accompanied by a team of high-powered lawyers, denied everything. He painted me as a delusional, unstable woman, desperate for attention. He claimed I was trying to destroy his family, to extort money from him. Daniel was there, sitting next to his father, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. He refused to look at me, refused to speak to me. It was as if I were a stranger, an enemy. But I had my journal, my meticulous record of Robert's behavior. And I had Michael, my unwavering support, my witness. The judge listened to both sides, reviewed the evidence, and ultimately granted the restraining order. Robert was ordered to stay away from me, to have no contact with me, direct or indirect. He was also ordered to move out of the main house, at least temporarily. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. I felt a sense of relief, of vindication. But the battle was far from over. The divorce proceedings were even more grueling. Daniel, fueled by his father's lies and his own sense of betrayal, fought me every step of the way. He accused me of infidelity, of mental instability, of trying to ruin his family's reputation. The media got hold of the story, and it became a tabloid sensation. "Gold digger daughter-in-law accuses wealthy father-in-law of abuse," the headline screamed. I was hounded by reporters, vilified online, and ostracized by the community I had once tried so hard to be a part of. But I refused to be silenced. I refused to be intimidated. I had the truth on my side, and I was determined to fight for my freedom, my dignity, and my future. The trial lasted for weeks. It was a brutal, emotionally draining ordeal. I had to relive every painful detail, every uncomfortable encounter, every moment of fear and humiliation. I had to face Robert's cold, calculating stare, Daniel's heartbroken and bewildered gaze, and the judgmental eyes of the public. In the end, the truth prevailed. The evidence, my testimony, and Michael's unwavering support were enough to convince the judge. The divorce was granted, and I was awarded a substantial settlement. But the victory felt hollow. I had lost my husband, my family, my home, my reputation. I had been branded a liar, a manipulator, a gold digger. I had been forced to expose my deepest vulnerabilities to the world. The aftermath was a long and difficult road to recovery. I moved to a new city, started a new job, and tried to rebuild my life. I went to therapy, I joined a support group, I leaned on my friends and family. Slowly, gradually, I began to heal. I learned to trust again, to love again, to believe in myself again. But the scars remained. The memory of Robert's touch, his words, his betrayal would always be with me. The pain of losing Daniel, of seeing my marriage crumble, would always be a part of my story. One day, years later, I received a phone call from Michael. He told me that Robert had died of a heart attack. He said that Daniel had finally realized the truth about his father, that he had found some old letters, some hidden documents, that confirmed Robert's history of manipulation and abuse. Daniel wanted to apologize, to ask for my forgiveness. But I couldn't. It was too late. The damage was done. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mixture of sadness, relief, and emptiness. The chapter was finally closed, but the story would always be a part of me. But there was a feeling of finality, of knowing the truth had, in its own tragic way, prevailed. I looked out the window at the city skyline stretching before me. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the buildings. It was a beautiful sight, a reminder that even after the darkest storms, there is always the promise of a new dawn. I found myself. I became my old self again. The road to the old self was long and slow, but with courage and hope, I am happy again. I am Olivia, and I am a survivor. I am strong, I am resilient, and I am free. And that, I realized, is the true American dream. A dream of resilience, of finding your own strength, of rebuilding your life after it's been shattered. It's not about the perfect house, the perfect family, or the perfect facade. It's about the courage to face the truth, to speak your truth, and to live your truth, no matter the cost. The scars remained, a constant reminder of the pain, but also a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to heal, to forgive, and to love again. Even with secrets, even with broken trust, even with whispers behind closed doors. The American dream is more than just dreams but nightmares too.